Welcome back. I'm David Wilson, leadership coach and founder of Dominion Street Coaching. In this series, I share insights from my practice drawing upon years spent in the worlds of law and investment banking. Change before you have to. It's a simple line, it's memorable, practical, and I think quietly demanding, because on the surface it sounds like good advice. But in reality, it asks something quite difficult of us as leaders. To recognize when the way we've been operating, often very successfully, is no longer going to be enough for what comes next. And that's not easy. In fact, one of the real tensions in leadership is that we're often rewarded for the very behaviours we eventually need to let go of. Think about that for a moment. The behaviours that helped you succeed earlier in your career, those habits, instincts, and ways of working, don't suddenly disappear when you step into a bigger role. If anything, they become more deeply ingrained. They've worked. They've been reinforced. They've likely been recognized and rewarded. But leadership is not static. What's required of you evolves, and sometimes those same strengths can quietly become constraints, or derailers even. Take control. Early on, being detail-oriented, staying close to the work and ensuring high standards was very valuable. It built credibility and delivered results. But later, that same instinct for control can limit you, because now the role requires delegation, it requires trust, it requires creating a space for others to step up. Take expertise. Being the person with the answers probably took you a long way. It built confidence in others and established your authority. But as your scope grows, leadership becomes less about having the answers and more about creating the conditions for better answers to emerge from your team and from across the organization. And then there's speed. Decisiveness is often seen as a strength. Moving quickly, keeping momentum, solving problems. But not every situation benefits from speed. Sometimes what's needed is reflection. Pause. A slightly longer view that leads to a better decision, not just a faster one. So the question becomes, how do you notice when it's time to shift? Because the truth is, it's very difficult to see these patterns in ourselves. We're too close to them. They feel normal. They've worked for us. And this is where coaching can play a really important role. At its best, coaching isn't about giving advice. It's about helping you see what you can no longer see on your own. It's about surfacing those patterns, those default ways of operating that may have outlived their usefulness. And perhaps, just as importantly, coaching creates something that many senior leaders are in short supply of, and that's space. Protected, intentional space to think. Not about the immediate issue of the week, not about the next meeting or the next decision, but about themselves, about the kind of leader they want to become next. Because the most effective leaders don't wait until change is forced upon them. They don't wait for performance to dip, or for feedback to become unavoidable, or for circumstances to make the shift obvious. They move earlier than that. They sense when something is no longer quite right, when a strength is starting to become a limitation, when the context around them has changed, even if they haven't. And they act on that. They change before they have to. So here's a question to leave you with. What behaviour made you successful 5 years ago that might now be limiting you? It's not always a comfortable question, but it's often a useful one, because leadership transitions rarely fail through a lack of capability. More often, they falter because we continue to rely on behaviours that once worked, but are no longer what's needed. And noticing that shift, that's often where meaningful change begins. Thank you for listening.